Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Happy Moment. My name is Dan. Glad to have all of you join me today. And today I do have a very special guest on the show. He is the host of the Static Radio podcast. Please welcome Bob LeMent. Hey, Bob.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Bob. How about yourself?
Pretty good. It's a pretty good night, I'd say. I was
Awesome.
just I was
And
just watching birds feed in my backyard. That was my big entertainment for the evening. Was a bunch of swallows eating bugs, which I know thrills
okay.
everybody. You're like, what are you talking about?
Did you see any unusual birds?
No. Well, what was unusual is there probably was like 6 to 10 swallows flying around the backyard, eating bugs like voraciously. It was almost like a little ball of swallows that were just flying back and forth. And I'm assuming eating bugs because that's what they do typically. But I've never seen that many at one time in the yard doing that. Usually you see one or two, but to see almost 10 of them was just a little bit much. I thought something was going on. But
Yeah, it's
luckily they
the
were just hungry, and apparently there's lots of bugs tonight. So
well, hopefully it doesn't turn into an episode of or a version of the Alfred Hitchcock movie
yeah,
The Birds and you get
right,
swarmed by them.
exactly. Yeah, but well, besides that, and the fact that there was squirrels stealing apples off my apple tree and running across the yard, that was the two entertaining things tonight out the window was birds and squirrels.
I
It's
know it's going to be hard to top that, but we're going to try tonight.
yeah, we only can go up from here. We're good.
So Bob, you've been podcasting for quite a while now. Would you like to tell us a little about yourself and how you got started in that?
Sure. So, yeah, the show that I do with my co-host Miles, we've been doing this show online for it'll be 25 years coming in January, and we used to do college radio together back in the 90s, right? And then in the late 90s, we graduated and we wanted to keep doing a show. And at the time, I decided I wanted to learn how to make a website and stuff like that. And so I said, hey, how about we just continue doing our college radio show online? And that's what kind of formed into what we've been doing. So the difference was at that time, you're younger than I am. I can tell just looking at you. I know I don't look that old from this picture, but I'm a little older than you are. And at the time, Napster was happening, and so we couldn't play music. So we used to play music on the college radio and then talk in between. But Napster, where they were suing grandmas and whatnot, was happening. So I said, we're just going to drop the music and we'll just do the talking because we used to tell funny stories, and we've continued to tell funny stories since then. So it was before there was the term podcasting. So this was at the time was called internet radio, was the moniker that people hung on it, and there was not really a lot of people because it was before MP3s were even a thing, which I know most people would be like, what are you talking about? MP3s have been around forever. But everything has a beginning, folks, and this was before that. And so we've been doing that. We do a weekly show, and we've done a weekly show essentially since that day. And then obviously everything's changed over time, and podcasting became a thing back in 2004, I think, when Adam Curry and Dave Weiner worked on the RSS enclosure for MP3s at that point, which MP3s really kind of where I think the revolution of all this was the fact that you had an audio format that was portable, right? And so then they took the RSS and adapted it to enclose MP3 files, and we're off to the races. And now we have podcasting, and there's a lot of stuff that happened in between there, but I don't want to bore everybody with the details, but that's where it all started, though. But we were recording for about almost 5 years before all that happened. And you can actually listen to all of it if you go to staticradio.com. You can go listen to all those old shows if you really want to. Take a time capsule back into the late 90s, early 2000s, and hear what's going on. So yeah, I mean, most of it's just stories about what we don't talk about, current events, unless it impacts our story. So each week we come together, and the tagline that we came up with back then, that we still use today, it was the strange and humorous lives of two Midwesterners, because we both live in the Midwest. And basically each week we just tell a story about something that's happened to us in our lives, or that we've witnessed. And it runs the gamut from a lot of my old stories are about my kids when they were young, and about funny things that they did. Like when my son was little, I always used to laugh because he talked like Mario. If you play video games, right? We talked about that before we
Yep.
started. You play any of the old Mario games where he talks, he goes, "Hey, it's me, Mario," right? And so that's what my son sounded like when he was a little kid. Dad, what are we doing, Dad? And he would just talk. I mean, that's what he talked like. And so I always thought it was hilarious that I had this little kid running around my house talking like Mario. I don't know why he did that. It's just that was just his inflection at that point in time. He doesn't talk like that now, but which would actually be even funnier, I think. But maybe a hindrance in his life a little bit. But yeah, so stuff like that, and we both love animals, and we always have stories about what our animals are doing to aggravate us, or make our lives miserable, because animals are uncontrollable, and we try to think that we have some kind of influence, but they always do stuff that you don't want them to do. Like, for instance, one of my cats, we had a couple cats, and one of my cats would randomly poop in the house, which is not a good deal, right? So
No, no.
and so I set upon a mission to find who was doing this, and this would be back in the early 2000s. So it wasn't like you had a Ring doorbell you could set down somewhere, or some type of motion sensor, easy and cheap motion sensor device that we have today, right? So I had a camcorder that I had to hook up to a desktop computer, and I had software then that would do the motion sensor. It would feed to it was the whole thing. You had a video card, and it was a whole like contraption, and you fed that into the computer, and it would monitor the video. And then if it saw movement, it would start recording for a very, very short time, because again, like we're doing this now, it's just amazing that we can do this, where in the past any kind of video would have been taxing for equipment and so forth. So anyway, I caught the cat that did it, and she happened to be right in front of the camera, like pointing, aiming the weapon at the camera while it happened. And so then that became a whole story about catching the cat, and because of the video, I call it the phantom anus, because we caught the phantom anus. So just fun stuff like that. And it's just, over the years it's changed as technology's changed, as our kids grow up and so forth, and then you get into other territory about achy bones, and I usually end up hurting myself at least once a year, so that usually makes a good story, to where I'm laid up because I've dislocated a knee or something. So, which doesn't
How are
sound
you doing
funny,
this
but
year?
you do what you can.
How are you doing this year? Have you hurt yourself at all?
So far so good, but I'm trying to
Oh,
be a
good.
little more careful. But you can't always help it, right? So I've got very loose knees, and it becomes a story a lot, because I have very, very bad knees. And so, I mean, literally I can be getting out of a car and step wrong, and then pop, and then I'm having to go to physical therapy or something. But so far so good this year. but it's only helped by trying to be a little more cautious in my life and not just jump at things or be too quick to turn. I sound like a terrible old man now. I shouldn't even have mentioned this. I'm not that old, but I do have really bad knees, and I have injured myself multiple times because of faulty genetics, is what I'll say. I'll stand by that. It's not my fault. It's my genetics.
That's right. Bob, 25 years. That's a long time to be podcasting. Uh,
Yeah.
what would what would you say has been I guess the best thing to come out of it for you? Like
Oh wow,
what
that's a
kind of
good.
impact has it
Okay.
had on your life?
Well, and if you ask me that in like a week, I'll probably give you a different answer. But because every time those kind of questions are tough to answer because you always are. It's whatever front of mind is, right? So I would say that probably the best thing has been that I could still do this. I mean, it's still fresh, right? So Miles and I still have a banter, and we still talk. We can talk to each other and tell each other stories and laugh at them, and it hasn't gotten old yet. And a lot of times people ask me, how do you continue to come up with stories? And I'm like, at first, right, you'd be like, okay, I got like 5 good stories, and I'm going to tell them, and then they'll be done, right? But over the years, it just has come to my attention how much how interesting your life can be if you're just paying attention. And I think that's probably one of the best things. And that's something that when I say it, doesn't sound like normal, I suppose, but I think so many people go through life um, thinking about other things, right? They're not living in the now, they're not living in the here, right? And they're thinking about either something that happened or something that's going to happen or something that they want to happen. And they're not experiencing life. And it's by doing this, I really have taken the time to be in the now a lot and to notice what's happening. And there's so much interesting stuff that's happening in the now that I would have never, had when I was, pre-college days, I'd never even thought about. Right. And so I've had that, I think kind of realization or revelation, whatever verb you want to use on that, that to do that really opens up your world a bit. And I did that a long time ago now, so I don't have to wait till I get old and then say, "Oh, you got to stop and smell the roses," because I've already been doing it. Because I had this, kind of epiphany back then to say, "Wow, all this stuff is happening around me, and I'm finally noticing it." And I can, it becomes fodder for what we do, but it also gives you a little insight, right? So a little insight into your own world, and you probably a lot of people don't have that, which I think is kind of sad. But I think that's one of the best things. And then the fact that I'm still friends with Miles, and we do something every week that's fun, even though we don't live near each other and haven't lived near each other since college. And so I think those are probably the best things to come out of all this. That and and this is going to sound corny, but I have 25 years of stories that I have recorded, and they're all there for me to listen to again and remember, or other people to listen to. So it's almost like journaling in a way, right? So if you've ever run into anybody who loves to journal, and they go on and on about how great journaling is, have you ever had anybody like that?
Not that I can think of.
Really, you haven't? There was a point in time where journaling was kind of a thing, and these people would go on and on about how they journaled, and you'd be like, so what? You wrote down you went to the grocery store or something, right? What could you have done? Well, if you do it is fun, because then you have all these, because everybody thinks their memory is rock solid and they remember everything, but that's not the case, right? We constantly we constantly flake off memories as we move through time, And so, yeah, I mean, that's, a positive for all this is that now I feel like, Dumbledore pulling memories out of my head and putting them in a bottle, right? So you Harry Potter reference there. So it's like that, but you can't do that part, but you can do this, and it's something that keeps track of things for you, and shows progression, and shows where you were and what you were doing, and what was important to you at that point in time. I think for other thing for me, having kids, is that there's all these kid stories that have been recorded, that are there, right? And so we can, if you wanted to, but you don't always go back to it, but if you wanted to, you could go back to it and hear about that. And my kids were little, and they don't remember a lot of these things happening because they were too little, and they've moved on with their life and forgotten about them. But we have a snapshot, a little audio snapshot of sorts, about their lives when they were little. So that's great too.
Yeah, that's very cool. Now, over the years, you must have talked to quite a few people on your show. Have you ever had any instances of a guest coming on and uh, things kind of taking a turn for the worse or not going as you expected?
um, Sure. I'm trying to think of one that I can tell that's not going to be too terrible. But yeah, I mean, so we don't have guests every week, but we have had guests, and we've had guests since the beginning. And some of them are great, and everything goes well. And some of them, are interesting in and of themselves, because now people are a little more in tune with this kind of thing, and so being a guest, or talking about a topic is a little easier for people than it used to be, right? So it, average everyday people, or people who weren't in the media business, didn't get to talk very much prior to all the podcasting stuff happening, right? And so they're not primed for stuff like that, and so their delivery and so forth is never the best, necessarily, especially a long time ago. So where you're the interviewer here and I'm the interviewee, we know that we each have a role to play in this, and you're setting up a question, and then I'm supposed to run with that question because I'm the interviewee. Where that doesn't always happen in certain situations, where you go, you say, Bob, have you had a guest that's interesting? And I would go, yeah, but that's not the way that it works really well, right? And so then you have to go through these interviews with these one word answers. It's like, well, I can't sing in your head. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And so then you there's, kind of you pulling the information out of a person is always difficult, right? So you don't want that to happen. And we've had a few of those, but I'll tell you, one of the most famous, and also one of the worst things that have happened in an interview situation, because essentially the interview didn't happen. But a long time ago, pre podcasting itself, probably I would say around 2003, there's this guy named Will Wheaton. Do you know who Will Wheaton is?
I'm a
Perhaps.
little bit familiar with him. Yeah, he's an actor.
He's an actor. He's been on Big Bang Theory. He was in Star Trek when he was a young man. And this was after he was in Star Trek, but before he was on Big Bang Theory. So it was a big gap of time. Well, he was quite a noted blogger back in those days when he wasn't acting, right? So he was acting for a while. He stopped acting. And then I think he wanted to act more, but people weren't giving him a call, right? Kind of things went cold, and so he was living his life, and he was a blogger, and he wrote some great things. So if you ever get a chance, I don't know if they're still out there, to be honest with you, but Will Wheaton used to write very well, and at this point in time, he was putting out a book, I believe, based on his blog. And so I contacted him to talk to him, because I'm a Star Trek fan, love Star Trek. He was on Next Generation. He was Wesley Crusher, who some people hate and some people love. So I thought this would be great. And so I was able to find via his blog. He had a public way to contact him, and I contacted him and I set up an interview. Well, Miles, my partner, I included him on all these emails, and he decided to jump into the conversation kind of late, right? So everything was set up. So this is why you don't want to necessarily have a partner a lot of times. You want to just have one person take care of things rather than two. He steps into the conversation late and he asks a rather risque question about Stand By Me. And I won't go into it because it's probably beyond PG-13. But he asked a question about Stand By Me and the other actors. And I'm like, why did he do that? Well, of course, Will Wheaton said, I'm not talking to you. Even though everything was set, right? Like you and I set up a time, everything was going. And at the time, there was no Riverside or anything like that. It was just going to be a phone interview. And yeah, it got totally dashed. And to this day, I still hold this against Miles. And I'm like, I'll book my guests and you book your guests, and never the twain shall meet, because it just gets messed up. So yeah, so that was probably one of our more famous contacts at the time. Now since then, he's kind of gone on to more success again. But yeah, he does not want to talk to me, even though I really wasn't even part of this. This was all my partner's fault. But that didn't happen. But we talked to people who were authors and people who were on TV shows, mostly cable shows and so forth, over the years and so forth. But yeah, that was probably if you had to say a Hollywood person, he was at some point, he was still a Hollywood person now, but at the time he was kind of in a lull for parts. So it's kind of silly. I know the one that got away, but it was our own fault, right? It would be like handing a reel over to somebody who just jerks the hook out of their mouth or something. That was the way it was.
Have you ever reached out to him and tried and mend the fences?
No, I no. Now he got popular again, right? So he's not going to talk to me anyway. At the time, when he was blogging, though, I mean, because we were all internet based, right, and that was kind of a thing. And so there was, rather than being one world, there was two worlds essentially, right? So if you were doing things online, that was the online world, and so there wasn't so much, old media influence in the online world at that time. And so we kind of operated in two separate areas. Nowadays it's all intermingled, right? And essentially this is media, right? You and I are doing what would be called mainstream media right now, where back then that wasn't the case. That was just, this is just these online people doing their thing, right? But now everything's flipped. So it's all mainstream, but obviously, there's tiers of things. And so I'm sure that we would have to go through representation and so forth, as opposed to just sending off an email from a website,
right,
to get a hold of him. So too many doors to knock on, perhaps.
Yeah,
and he may have written me down. If you remember, on Big Bang Theory, there was a kind of a rivalry between him and Sheldon Cooper. I don't think that we're there. We're forgotten, but it could be like that. In my mind, I can make it like that. How's that?
The only thing I really know Will from is The Guild. Have you ever watched that?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I know him best from. But Bob, I got an important question for you.
Sure.
What's the first thing that pops into your mind when I say UFO?
Oh my gosh, UFO. Well, and did I tell you that I had a UFO experience? Did I write that over to you?
No, you didn't.
Oh, well, then you hit upon something, then, didn't you? I had a UFO experience.
Oh, please tell.
So if you're curious about that, I'm happy to talk about it. That's the first thing that enters my mind, is the fact that I had a sighting, right? And I talked about this on our show when it happened, and this was back in May of 2005. So in May of 2005, and this is a daylight sighting, so there's no like, oh, I saw a light in the sky and it didn't move, whatever. Not that I'm putting that down. I'm just saying that there's a difference between nighttime and daytime, right? So uh, obvious difference because it's bright and then it's dark. But anyway, the so yeah, I had daylight sighting about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I had got my kids and picked them up and brought them home, and I was pushing them on the swing in the backyard, which sounds like we're going to go into Close Encounters or something, but it sounds idyllic, right? It sounds like a Spielberg movie. It's a setup. Um, so anyway, I'm pushing my kids on the swing, and my son, who was very young at the time, loved to look at airplanes, and so I was kind of pushing them and looking up in order to, because we had a lot of airplanes that used to come over our house at the time because we were close to airports, and so I was pushing him, and then if I saw a plane, I'd say, "Buddy, there's a plane up there." And oh, there's a plane. He was fascinated with this whole thing. I don't know what kind of planes they were. We didn't talk. This wasn't a engineering discussion. This was a little kid just loves to see planes, kind of like they like to see dump trucks. That kind of a situation. So I'm doing this, and I look up out of the corner of my eye. I catch something. I look over to see what it is, and it is a sphere. It looked like a metal sphere that was about the height of an airplane, which would be somewhere around 20,000 feet, is my guess. It's typically what they do. And it was traveling from southeast to northwest across my field of view. And we had seen planes, so there was planes that were flying in the sky, but I watched it, and it went, from my field of view on the one side all the way to the other side in less than 15 seconds maybe. And I just watched it, and I saw the front of it and I saw the back of it. This is what everybody always asks me when I do this. When I talk about this, they're like, "Oh, you just saw the front of a jet." No, saw the front of it, saw the back of it. No wings, a metal ball flying through the air. I saw it going behind clouds and in front of clouds. So that's how high it was. And it just went, whew, and I just was still swinging my kids. I couldn't believe it. And again, this is 2005. Now, the other thing over time here is I said it was a metal sphere. At that time, I had never really read anything or saw anything about a metal sphere UFO. They were always a disc or a cylinder or a triangle, right? So there wasn't, at least for my limited research, there wasn't any spheres that were seen very much. And so yeah, I saw that. My kids didn't see it. They were just swinging, having a good time. I didn't say anything because it happened so fast. And then everybody's always like, "Well, why didn't you get a picture?" I'm like, "Well, this is the cell phone I had probably was, you could still play Snake on, and it was like a Nokia candy bar phone, if that, and the pictures on it would have been junk, just utter crap pictures. You wouldn't be able to see what I was seeing with my eye." And yeah, so I didn't have a phone on me with a camera. I didn't have a camera on me, and nothing of that. It just all happened so fast. So I couldn't believe it. And I was sitting there thinking about it, because these things happen. And I think people who have that experience, you question, right? You're like, did I really see that? And so the internet was younger then, to 2005. So I did some searches and so forth, and I ended up finding a site called ufomaps.com. And I looked on there, and somebody had put on there. This took me like probably off and on researching, over the next few days after this happened. And I found somebody who reported to ufomaps.com the same thing I saw in another town in the direction that it was going. And so then to me, that was a little bit of confirmation, at least that somebody else saw something the same that I saw, right? And yeah, and but at the time, the different world. Like when you asked that UFO question, I mean, what almost 20 years ago, everybody just made fun of you, and I got made fun of mercilessly because I did talk about it. I talked about it on our show. I got made fun of by my co-host. I talk about it with my friends. I got made fun of by my friends, but I saw it, right? It was definitely there. It was definitely round like a sphere, and it definitely looked like it was made of metal. And but as time goes on now, this is all much more commonplace, right? And more acceptable to have, for people to talk about it, as opposed to 20 years ago when, yeah, I would talk about it at work, and my workmate that I used to have lunch with a lot then is like, oh, I did like this stuff. I loved UFOs and reading about them and watching shows and whatnot. He's like, you just manifested this because you love this stuff. I'm like, that no, because I would have done it a long time ago when I was, because I'm interested in it. I'd be manifesting these things every day, and it only happened once, the only time it's ever happened. And it didn't land. It didn't send me a message. It didn't, wink at me. It didn't do anything. It just flew overhead. And I happened to randomly catch it because I was there and I was looking up at the sky. And it's about as random as you can get. But since then, I haven't really seen anything since then like that experience, especially in broad daylight and so forth. I will sit out and watch the sky from time to time to see if I can catch something else, but I never have. And they have a great thing now. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I'll tell you, it's called Flight Radar 24. And it's an app for your phone or for your tablet, and you can see where all the planes are flying. So if you do look up and you see something in the sky, you can say, oh, is that a plane? I can look it up. And they also have it for satellites too. So there,
That's
you can
cool.
make sure you eliminate all that kind of stuff as you're with your interest. But I don't sit out like every night or anything and look for these things. But if I just happen to be outside, I'll kind of look and see what's what, just to see if I can see anything. But yeah, for me at the time, being a daylight kind of a situation and so forth was really just amazing. It's just an amazing thing. And I couldn't tell you, they always like, is it extraterrestrial? I have no clue. It was just, it just happened. Maybe there's military, spheres that fly around the world. I don't know. Because that's the extent of my experience. But I've never seen one, and I've never read about one. And so far, no one's showed up at an air show with a flying sphere. Until that happens, I'm assuming that it's something that's not from the people we know about.
Uh,
It wasn't a
rough,
cannonball or anything. It was really high up in the air.
like roughly what size would you say it was?
My guess is, and again, this happened so fast, but we were watching planes, and so my guess is that it was about 4 times the size of like a 747.
Oh wow.
But round, right? So it's bigger than the 747. But if you think of the front of a 747 nose cone and make it 4 times as large and fill it out as a ball, then yeah, that's probably it.
Oh wow. Bob,
Yeah, it was weird, very weird.
have you ever seen any other strange things in your life? Not necessarily UFOs, but any other
Oh
kind of.
yeah, boy, you're hitting upon, this is one of my topic areas. I love to talk. I hardly ever talk about it on my show because I'm usually just being goofy and funny. But other weird thing that's happened to me, again, it's not a lot, and it's not like I, you know, am going out every weekend or something and encountering all this stuff. This is just random stuff. So another weird story for you is so our house burnt down a few years ago, and we had to, terrible, right? So you can cry. It's okay. Don't. It's okay if you cry. No, I'm just joking. So no, it was really terrible. So we had to move into a rental house, and this was like a 1990 something style, cul-de-sac house, right? So it's not an old house. It's not a new house. It may have even been 2000. I mean, it's not that old of a house. You know what I'm saying? And this was probably about 5 years ago or so. And so we have nothing, right? Because everything's gone. And we were staying in a hotel for a while, and but we couldn't stay there for. We had to get our house rebuilt, so it was like a year. So we had to find some place to live, and so we found this house, and we move into it with nothing. And literally, this is the power of Amazon here. My wife sets it up so that our first day at the house, Amazon brings the packed up mattresses that are in a box and bed frames to the house for everybody, right? So we get there in the morning and we're sitting on the floor waiting for the Amazon guy to drop off all his stuff. And so anyway, he drops off, and then all I do the rest of the day is put together beds and get everybody situated so we can sleep somewhere that night. No furniture whatsoever. And so I get all that done. And so we're living in this very empty house at this point. And we met the neighbors, there's for how, I don't know how it works in the world, because I'm not, even though we're having a nice conversation here, I'm not an overly social person in real life. I don't go and introduce myself to people. And so the neighbors all knew our plight somehow, and we're coming over to, oh, sorry, your house burnt down. If you need anything, if you need something, being very, very nice. And we don't even live in this neighborhood. We just are there temporarily. Very, very nice people. Now, one of the people was like a car salesman guy who was like, your stereotypical car salesman. Hey, I'm Hal. How you doing? Shakes your hand. Kind of an overly, gregarious kind of guy, right? And so that night, or the next night, I can't remember, but very soon after we got there, we go to bed, and in the night, so all we have is the blinds. There's no like curtains or anything. All the house had blinds, and so only the blinds. I wake up in the middle of the night at like 2:00 in the morning, and I kind of roll over and I'm looking at a window that is right there, not too far from the bed, and I see a outline of a person. And to me, in my kind of sleepiness, it looked like somebody was standing outside the window looking in. Okay. And in my head at the time, I'm like, oh, it's that kooky car salesman guy out in the yard. Right. And I'm like, this is weird, but he's not like putting his face against the window. It's like he's a little bit away from it, but you can see his outline. Right. And so I'm like, I'm so tired. I mean, if you've ever gone through something like that, you're kind of emotionally drained and you're so tired because you have so much to do in such a short time, and to figure out how you're going to move on with your life, right? I mean, I still had to go to work. So, I mean, I took a day or whatever, but it wasn't like I took a month off or something. I just took some days off. So you're drained. And so then I roll over, I go back to sleep. So the next morning, my son, he comes up to me and says, hey, I want to talk to you about something. I say, sure. And he goes, last night, a shadow came into my room and tried to grab my leg. I'm like, what? He's like, I was sitting there, right? So we had gotten iPads, so people had something to do. He had his iPad or whatever. He was sitting there. He stayed up late. Went to bed. He said, yeah, this thing came through the door. It was just like a shadow. And it came over to the bed where I was at and tried to grab my leg. And then he ran out of there. And then he didn't know where it went, right? Disappeared. And so as a dad, right, But in my head, as me, I'm like, oh my God, I saw a shadow too. Right. But as a dad, I'm like, I can't, we have nowhere to live except for here. And we're here for a year until this situation gets rectified. Right. So I'm like, oh, I'm sure it was nothing, but you know, um, tell me if something else happens. But in my head, I'm totally freaked out because now we've got this thing in the house, and I saw it, and he saw it in the same evening. So, um, we go on a little bit, and then he tells me again. He's like, I saw this thing walking around the kitchen, and it went from the kitchen and went out into the garage, like without opening the door, just through the door. Again, oh, don't worry about it. It's nothing. It's nothing. Now, I never saw it again. He saw it a couple more times. Now, then we got a dog because we had lost our pets in the fire and everybody wanted a dog. So we had got a dog, and the dog came into the house. And then at the time, we were living there with practically nothing. And so the basement was totally empty. It wasn't a finished basement, it was just a concrete basement. And we would play with the dog down there. We had a tennis ball, and we'd throw the tennis ball and have the dog run around. And the dog would not go in one corner of this basement, no matter what, even to get the tennis ball that he'd been chasing the whole time. So then we never saw, after probably, I don't know, a week or two, we never saw the shadow again. My son never saw it. I never saw it. My wife never saw it ever. But we would hear weird things in the basement, and then the dog wouldn't go in this corner of the basement. Now, again, I have an interest in, I love these haunted shows. A lot of them are fun, right, to watch. But I never had an experience. And I should say, I've almost never had an experience since. I've had another one, but not the same kind of experience. And so this was really shocking because it was really, real. And again, people are like, oh, you're just thinking about these things. But no, it wasn't. I mean, again, I would have thought about these things and manifested them earlier because that would be much more fun in a non terrible situation to manifest these things than it was at that time. So we had to live with this kind of thing. And every once in a while we'd hear noises in the basement, and my wife would say something. And I kept this secret from my family until we moved out. So a year, I knew that this had happened, and I had seen it too. And I didn't say anything because I didn't want to freak everybody out because we had to stay there. I mean, there was no place else to go. And because oddly enough, I don't know if people know this, but you still have to make your mortgage payment even if your house burns down. Unless you have some type of insurance that pays it for you, then you have to pay for it. So it's not like there's an excess. All of a sudden, when your house burns down, you have an excess of money. It's actually the other way. You'll have no money because basically, even if you have insurance, you have to wait and prove when you purchase something, you have to show them receipts. So then you have to have an influx of money in order to replace all the things you had, because you have to replace them before they'll give you any money for them. And you could max out your credit cards or whatever, but you know what I'm saying. If you're talking about house full of stuff, that's not the kind of debt you want to jump right into out of the gate. So anyway, that's the serious side of this. But yeah, I waited a whole year, and I waited till we moved back into our house after it was rebuilt to tell anybody about it. My wife was extremely angry with me because I hadn't said anything to her, even though she was right there with me whenever I saw it. And eventually everything calmed down a bit, but it was just weird noises. And I just write, it's just a house, weird house stuff, nothing to it. Right. So anyway, that's that story as far as that goes. But that's been my own experience with a shadow person, if you will. Were you expecting that?
I didn't know what I was expecting, but that'd be I just try to put myself in your shoes, and that'd be pretty spooky to experience.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah, and not it was not um there was nothing, negative about it other than the experience of feeling that your space is violated, I suppose. There wasn't, no exorcist kind of business or anything negative like that. It just was weird. It was really, really weird. And to me, both these experiences to me kind of open up um my thoughts, right? So I love to watch these kind of shows, and I love to think about them, and but until you have the experience, then that's really when it kind of hits home, and you're like, oh my gosh, these poor people, right? Because everybody is not equipped for every situation, right? And so I think it really, makes you have a little bit more empathy for the folks who are going through these kind of things, and makes you believe them more. Um, that there are so many things that we don't understand in this world, and so it's maybe it is now. Obviously there's uh, you know things happen, and people put uh put things, so like right now, if you read a lot of this kind of stuff, you'll see that people see the Starlink satellites being deployed and they think they're UFOs because it's so strange in the sky, right? So then all of a sudden this one thing that's fairly tight becomes many things over the its path on the sky. And so there's been a lot of Starlink sightings that people believe are UFOs, right? But they're not, and it does look weird. And there's meteors, and they look like UFOs, but they're not. And so I think, if not to say that people aren't having these experiences, but I think you still have to have a healthy skepticism, right? So when I saw my thing, even though we weren't in the era that we are now, I looked for some confirmation beyond my knowledge, right? And I think that's what everybody has to do. Same thing with the shadow thing, right? You have to look for to see, could it be something? Could it have been my weird neighbor standing outside my window, which is what I thought, but it wasn't. So, yeah, it's just weird like that. I got a funny one for you if you want to hear it.
Yeah, just real quick, I was going to ask you, like, did you
Mhm.
ever like send the wife and the kid away and try and communicate with this shadow person?
No, no, I didn't want to communicate with anything. At that point, I'm like, I wanted to employ a don't bother us and we won't bother you technique. And that's essentially what I did.
Okay.
And even after we left, I didn't, like, at the end when I knew, we were leaving, we had a date and everything. I didn't even try to do anything. Now I can tell you that we left, and they rented it to some other people, and they left within a year. And then that house got sold after that. I haven't heard about it recently, and the people who were in the house before us left um, as well. So it had a lot of turnover. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it. I didn't talk to any of these people or anything. I kind of was like, let's leave well enough alone. That was my attitude towards it. And yeah, I mean, at some point in time, maybe I'll go back to it when but at the time it was such a stressful time that I didn't want to, upset the balance.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would have been a interesting experiment to. You mentioned there was that corner in the basement where the dog wouldn't go near. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe like get a little chalkboard and like leave it in the corner and come back the
Yeah.
next day and see if there's anything on it.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds pretty good. I could actually tell you where the house was still and everything, but at the time, no, I wasn't even going to get involved in that. And then, and now I don't have access or anything, but I don't know. Maybe it's different now. They say, if you read about, and I read up at the time and so forth, that traumatic events, right, can cause things to happen. And so we had a very traumatic event, and And so maybe this was the cause. That this is what resulted. I don't know. Um, but it seemed to be just the house. It wasn't like I saw these things out in the world anywhere. The only place I seen it was in the house. And so, but it wasn't, everybody talks about haunted houses. This is your typical cul-de-sac house. This is not anything special. So, that's what always confuses me with these, because everybody kind of points to, death or some type of terrible thing or some age to it where there's a lot of death. I mean, the chances of anybody even dying in this house were probably slim to none, because it wasn't even really that old. And so I think I'm more inclined to think, if, I were to speculate, that this is an entity that's not probably even a ghost. It's probably just an entity that there's more of that live here with us, and that we just happened to see it. We just got lucky again. Just like I was standing in the backyard and I saw this ball fly over us. Just got lucky.
Yeah. Bob, what's the other story you got?
Oh, this was funny, and I don't have an explanation for it. It'll be quick here, but so I have to travel for my work sometimes, and I was at a Holiday Inn, believe it or not, in middle of Missouri, and I've stayed at this Holiday Inn many, many times over the years, and I was there for a thing, and I got my room. I went in. I was going to go to bed. I got there, kind of late, I guess, but I got situated, and I went to bed, and I laid down and was going to sleep, and somebody burped in my ear. That's the funny part. So I'm laying there, kind of my head on the pillow, and it sounded like somebody leaned over my head and burped in my ear. And I immediately popped up and looked around, right? And nothing, right? Nothing there. And then I just wrote it off to, I was on a corner room, right? So two sides of that room, one side had the door, the other side was just a wall. Where my head was up against was the hallway was on the other side. And I'm like, okay, somebody was walking down the hallway and burped, and I just thought it was closer to me, right? So I had to get to sleep. So I wrote it off and I go to sleep. Well, the next day, this is where I try to trick myself into not believing myself. So the next day I go downstairs to do some work, and I don't know if like you're like me, but I don't check out of the hotel room until I have to. And so I left my stuff there, and I came back up at a break to get my stuff before checkout time. And I had traveled, like I think it was on a Sunday or something, for a Monday thing, and I had was wearing sandals or whatever, and I had nice shoes that I wore to this meeting. And so I took my nice shoes out of a bag that I had them in, and put my sandals in there, and they were on the other bed. You get two beds usually, and it was on the I don't know if at the hotel, a lot of times they put that fake comforter there at the bottom of the bed to make it look homey. I don't know what the deal is. Anyway, the shoes were in the bag along with my suitcase and everything, on the end of the bed, but not at the edge of the bed. Quite a bit, at least another shoe length up on the bed. I get back to the room, all my shoes are on the floor, and no one had been in there. I had the do not disturb sign on it. There wasn't a maid in there, I don't think. Nothing else was disturbed, but my shoes were thrown on the floor out of the bag. So if you can imagine, it was like a plastic bag that the shoes fit totally into, and it had a handle. So it's not like they're half sticking out, kind of askew. They were totally in the bag, so you could just pick them up by the handle on the floor. And I'm like, okay, something burped in my ear last night, and I ignored it. But again, it's not an old hotel. It's been redone. I don't know how many times over the years. It's fairly modern, So yeah, just a whole weird experience. But it's just funnier because it was somebody burped in my ear while I was trying to go to sleep, as opposed to something that's a little more scary, where somebody's watching you while you're sleeping. So
It's very strange.
it is strange, isn't it? Two straight, yeah. And you weren't even expecting any of these tonight. Oh my goodness.
No, no, like I just can't imagine like being some kind of ghost or spirit and just taking that opportunity to burp in someone's ear.
I know. It's almost like juvenile, right? I mean,
Right?
I don't know if you ever had friends do that, like where you're on your desk at school or something with your
Oh
head
yeah.
down and somebody does that. It was just like that. And I was just like, this is bizarre. And then I think I had pretty much written it off in my head until I came back with the shoes that way, because there was absolutely no reason for just that to be moved. You know what I mean? If you were gonna, I hadn't even slept on that other bed. It was still made. There was no reason to touch it. If there was a maid, I was in the other bed, but it was still messed up. Nobody had been in there as far as I could tell. And yeah, it just was totally bizarre. And at that point, I got my stuff and got out of there. I'm like, that's enough for me.
Oh, Bob, this this is this has been one of those episodes where I blink and the hour has just like flown by. It's been very interesting talking to you. You've had a lot of interesting stories, and I do have one more question for you.
Sure.
Uh, what's your all-time favorite fantasy movie?
Oh boy, that's another tough question.
Yeah, put you on the spot.
Yeah, you got a tough one too. It's fantasy movie. So are you gonna include any kind of science fiction? If you're give me your definition of fantasy real quick so that I know where I'm at there.
I'm gonna leave it open to
Because some people mix the
interpretation.
two, right?
Yeah. No, if you want to mix it, go ahead and mix it.
So I would say, if I, because I'm a little bit more of a sci-fi person, so I probably skew to that. But I'm going to give you three real quick off the
Okay.
top of my head, only because two of them are a little bit more science fiction, but one of them's in the middle. So if we went from fantasy to fantasy slash sci-fi, it would be Legend. I don't know if you know that movie, Tom
Uh,
Cruise movie, believe it or not,
I'm familiar
by
with it, but
Ridley
I've never
Scott.
seen it.
Oh yeah, it's not the best movie in the world, but I loved it. And then Zardoz, which is an older movie with Sean Connery of all people. And then I love the old Dune, so the David Lynch Dune,
I've
which
not
is
seen any of
you
those.
know, well, I've given you a list.
Yeah.
A list of things to maybe watch. Now, they're all of them are so. Legend was probably like 86, I would say, somewhere in that neighborhood. Zardoz was like in this like 73, 74, and then Dune was 84.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that they had the new Dune. Have you seen the new Dune?
No, I haven't.
Oh, really? Okay. I like the old one better. It's much weirder and much more interesting, if you ask me. But they remade the Dune. Now, if I ask you, what's your favorite fantasy movie, so you can give me one.
Oh boy, you're putting the pressure on me now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, I want to get a list because I want to. I love to watch these things, and so you're going to give me something to watch now.
um, but
If
it's
if I haven't
hard
seen it,
to pinpoint a favorite. But are
you
you
can give me a couple.
familiar? Are you familiar with the work of Ray Harryhausen?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So, Jason and the Argonauts,
Yeah,
or
like the Sinbad movies.
oh, I love those. Yeah, I've seen.
Okay.
I think I've seen all those.
Yeah, that's big
So,
fan of
did
the
you
stop
like
motion animation
Clash of the
there.
Titans?
Yep, yep.
Okay, because that would
Yeah.
be a later Harryhausen movie. And then he did Seven Voyages of Sinbad, I believe, was one of those. And he did Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah. Those are fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he did one, I think it's called It Came from 10,000 Feet Leagues or something like that.
Yeah,
That's a monster movie.
yeah, with the giant octopus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Beast from 10,000 Leagues or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Harryhausen fan. That's fantastic. Those are even older, though, than what I mentioned.
Yeah, and like Valley
Most
of
of them are.
Guanji
Hmm.
and fun stuff.
So, do you like the stop motion? Is that what you like,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
what do you like about it? Stop motion. The
yeah.
the
Anything that
the.
he did is pretty good.
Have you seen? Oh gosh, I'm on blank on the. It's a cartoon. It's a 3D cartoon from like the 2000 2010 um, era, and I'm blanking on the name of it. Darn, I wish I could think of this. My kids liked it, but it had a monster like the monster from Harryhausen movies, but it was like uh, a 3D cartoon. I can't think of the name of it now. All I can remember is I hate looking things. I like to try to make my memory do it, but I'm looking things up, sir. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Um, now I'm blank on the actor's name who was in it. I can't think of what the name of the movie was, but I think I know one of the actors in the movie. So now I got to
Okay.
find it.
Yeah, another great
Everybody
one
just
is
talk amongst yourselves while I'm doing this.
another great one is King Kong, the original.
Oh, the original, yeah, with Fay Ray. Did you like
Yeah.
the remake in the 70s
Uh
with Jeff Bridges? Have you seen that one?
yeah, I have, and I enjoyed it, but I wish there were more monsters, I guess. Because the original had like all the different dinosaurs and stuff, and
Right.
the 70s one just had like a giant snake, and I think that was it.
Yeah. No,
It had a
I'm
cool
with you. I
atmosphere
did
about it
like
though.
that. No, I'm close here. I can tell you I'm close. But it basically was mimicking a Harryhausen monster. Will Arnett voiced it,
Okay.
the monster. Monsters versus aliens.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that was
And
a
so Will
movie.
Arnett was one of the monster, and he it was 2009. There you go. He was the missing link.
That was a fun
Gosh,
movie.
why couldn't I remember that? It's so simple. Monsters versus aliens.
Yeah.
That's probably why I couldn't remember it, was because it was too simple.
I I saw on I don't remember where I saw it. Maybe it was on YouTube, but there was a stop motion movie just recently released. Um, I think it had been in production for a while though, so it wasn't like made recently, but they just released it
Mm-hmm.
recently. Called the I think it was called the Prime Evils,
Oh,
and it
okay.
had like a looked like it had like a King Kong type monster in it, but it was all stop motion. It looked pretty cool.
I haven't heard of that. Let me look it up here.
Yeah, I have to Google it or check it out on YouTube. I saw the trailer for it. It looked pretty interesting. I don't know if it
So,
was supposed to
okay.
be like a
So, is it
giant
a short
monkey or
movie or is it a longer movie?
I think it's a longer movie.
Really? I found a short from 2016 with that title. Otherwise, you got to go back to 2000
I'm
under
gonna have to look
Prime
that up
Evil.
now. Cause
Welcome
as
to Research as We Talk.
yeah, cause I'm curious now.
I found a short that was 2016, which looks like it's a stop motion thing, but I don't. They don't always show you everything. I don't know.
Okay, so if I go to YouTube and I type in the Primevals, it's the first thing that pops up as a trailer for it.
Okay.
Uh, it was posted a year ago, and
Hmm. I
is that
never
bringing
heard of
anything
that.
up for you?
I'm typing here. I'm sorry. Mm. Is it Evils? Oh, okay, with an S. I don't think I put the S on there.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
EVALS.
Actually, the Primeval. Yeah, that's just 2023. Okay. I think there was a toy called the Primevals.
Okay,
Maybe. It sounds
but yeah,
familiar.
check out the trailer for that. It looks pretty neat.
I'm looking at it right now. How interesting. Official trailer. Juliet Mills, Richard Joseph Paul. Yeah, there you go. It's got like a King Kong kind of guy going on. I'd say more Mighty Joe Young, perhaps.
Oh, that's another good one.
If you've seen Mighty Joe Young.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Cool. Now I'll have to check it out
yeah.
here. I wonder if it's rentable or is it just has it even come
I
out yet?
I think it is out. I think you can buy it. maybe if you go
Okay,
to
I will.
the creators or the creators website.
Mm-hmm.
Thought I saw where you could buy it somewhere.
All right, I found it on IMDb now. So
Yeah, and those of you
cool.
listening, I'll put a link in the description too, so you can check it out.
Yeah, so 2023 Primevals. It says you can buy it on Prime for $4.99.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, we have to do the voice now. Ready? When a group of explorers go in search of a yeti, they find themselves taken captive by an ancient race of alien creatures. There you go. That's the first line
Okay, very nice.
of the description. So yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Sorry, that's always the movie trailer guy voice. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, you
I don't
sounded
do I
like
don't
him.
do it justice, but I'm trying.
Bob, on that note, I think we'll wrap things up there. And the website is staticradio.com. That's where people can check out 25 years worth of episodes of your podcast. And do you have any social media handles you'd like to throw out there?
Yeah, most of them are at Static Radio. There's a couple that aren't, but who cares about those? All the important ones are at Static Radio.
Okay, very nice. Bob, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening to us. If you'd like to learn more about my podcast, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search for A Happy Moment Podcast. And I will see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.